Welcome to Culmination, where we're not experts, but we sure have a lot to say. In the process of becoming our best self, I have with me my previous math teacher and friend, Mr. Jim Miles, to discuss change. And with that said, let's get started. So, Jim, what is change?
Well, change can be a lot of things, Casey. Change can be how we adapt to things throughout our lives. Obviously, there's lots of things that happen in our lives that cause change. It can be forced or voluntary or by choice. So, change is just, I think, just kind of determining, how we want to live our lives and what kind of pathway we want to take through life based on things that, happen to us, whether it's, milestones that we reach or different events that happen in our lives, things that we experience throughout our lives, good and bad. So
Hmm.
yeah, I think change is driven by a lot of different things.
Yeah. Does everyone go through it?
Yeah, I don't know how anybody could really avoid change because life isn't static. Life doesn't stay the same. I mean, there's change happening all the time, all around us. Sometimes things affect us more than others, but yeah, I think everybody experiences change to some level, to some degree, and how you respond to it, I think, is you know it kind of determines your pathway and how much you might change or not change in the situation.
Right. I'm just asking the the generic questions first,
Hmm.
for some food for thought. Um, so I guess let's just get into it further. So, can you give me an example of a change that's inevitable?
Um, yeah, I mean, I think with just growing up, you reach different stages in your life. You reach different ages, whether you're changing, from one school to another. You're developing friendships and relationships. Families change. You get brothers and sisters, which change the dynamics of a family. Um, you graduate high school and you go off to college, or choose another career path or job, or let's say you don't even graduate from high school, you choose something else. Something else takes you on a different pathway, or
Mhm.
your life is not even on that pathway to begin with, but you're definitely going to experience changes that are inevitable. People die. There's death in life that you have to deal with. It is going to hit somebody. It hit everybody at some point. So those are a couple of ideas of inevitable changes.
Right. And what are its effects on you?
Well, again,
Do
I
you think
think
those are the biggest changes?
um, well, yeah, I think death and major life changes are some of the biggest changes that most people would probably experience. If you get married, obviously that's a big life change. Having kids is a big life change. Um, even for me, seeing kids go off to college is a big change. In our
Right.
family dynamics. So yeah, and how you respond to it, I think, is really kind of at the basis of how you handle it. Whether it becomes either a positive or negative situation for you.
Mhm. So, what about other kinds of changes? We know that some are inevitable, like when death comes,
Hmm.
or when you're about to reach another milestone, like, oh, college is approaching. What about changes that are not exactly inevitable, or ones that you can bring about yourself?
Um, well, things that are not inevitable but may happen could be something like, a breakup in a relationship, or um, you know, a, a, a friendship falling out, or um, a career change, maybe getting fired from a job, things that you don't plan on and don't foresee coming, or can't really control, or there's a layoffs at your job. things like that obviously are going to affect you. Um,
Hmm.
some people could take that as a really negative experience, and it could they can wallow in it and look at it from a negative standpoint. Or I remember my dad when I was young and something like that happened to me. I forget exactly what the situation was. I think it might have been a job situation, and his advice to me was, when one door closes, another door opens, and you have to look at it that way, that how you react or respond to it is what's going to define you.
I'm glad you said that, because it's like on one hand, the change itself is something big, but would you argue that it's more about your response to it?
Absolutely. I think that's really what sort of identifies um, how you handle change and how it shapes and molds you into the type of person that you are. And, it's not easy, because when change happens, especially if it's a negative change, to overcome that is, can be really difficult. Um,
Right.
and, maybe it's temporary, maybe it's short term. And eventually, you kind of get past it. But, everybody's going to respond differently. And I think um, it's just more about how you kind of frame it and how you prepare yourself for those kind of things that happen in life. And, by, I think, knowing yourself as best as you can and trying to be introspective and kind of understanding yourself, having, confidence in yourself, high self-esteem, those are the kind of things that are going to help you get through the tough times.
Right.
Um, but, that are also going to help you through the good times too. So, yeah, I think, change can definitely shape and mold you into who you are, and how you respond to it is kind of defines your character.
Right. And sometimes it forces you to become more confident or increase your self-esteem.
Hmm. Yeah,
Um, would you want to get into like a personal example or anecdote?
sure. I mean, I've had lots of changes in my life. I mean, I can start from just career standpoint. Um,
Sure.
when I got out of college, I wasn't really sure exactly what I wanted to do. I had a degree in criminal justice and legal studies. At one point, I thought I'd go to law school. Another point, I thought I'd go into law enforcement. I did end up in the legal field, but it was just sort of by association. My sister worked for the Department of Justice, and she helped me get my foot in the door at the U.S. Attorney's Office where I grew up. And so that kind of helped me at least stay in the field and kind of get a sense of whether I liked it or not, or whether it would lead it to anything. And it was just kind of entry, low level kind of a position, but it actually did end up panning out, because I proved myself as a valuable employee, and got recognized, and then got asked to take my skills and my talents to move from West Virginia up to Washington, D.C. So that was, a kind of a scary um, idea for me, because I was kind of a homebody, and I'd always been in West Virginia and hadn't traveled much and been out of my comfort zone too much. But I I looked at it as an opportunity. I looked at it as, a scary one, but a good opportunity to make a change, kind of change the trajectory of my path, and said, there's nothing that's holding me here. I'm not married. I'm not tied to anything. I have this opportunity. I need to see it as an opportunity. And I took advantage of it, and I moved to DC, and I told myself I must give myself 5 years to make this work, to see if this will work.
Right.
Uh, and I was driving back home on the weekends, 6 hours each way, many, many weekends at the beginning, because I didn't have anybody that I really knew up in DC. It was just, I was there for the work Monday to Friday, and that was pretty much it. But my life was back in West Virginia. But eventually I met more people, and I, got adjusted to life up in DC, and eventually, was blessed to meet my now wife of 25 years coming up in June. And so, if I hadn't made that commitment to change something, pretty drastic about my life and my career path, then that would have never happened. And then, I ended up marrying someone who's Jewish, and I'm not Jewish. So, that was a big change for me too, to learn and understand about something that I was unfamiliar with and someone I
Right.
was familiar with. So that was a huge adjustment for me to make that commitment to something that was um, unknown to me. So again, it created a situation for change and for opening up myself and doing a lot of introspection and learning a lot about myself and what I was willing to do or not do to adapt to that situation. So, but I decided to do it, and I've never looked back and had any regrets. So,
Yeah.
and then she ended up getting a job in Cincinnati, which brought us here back in 1998. So I left my job at the Justice Department and changed careers again. But I came to a law firm, so I was still in the legal field. So I was doing work at a law firm for a few years. I wasn't super super happy, but we had our first child at that time. Again, a big change in life, and I wasn't. I took time off. This is back in the beginning of the Family Medical Leave Act. Um, And so I took some time off to be at home with my newborn son. And my wife took some time off because our goal was to try to get him to 6 months old before we put him in a daycare.
Mhm.
So I took a couple months off. And my boss at the time at that job was kind of an old school guy who didn't quite understand the idea of a man taking off time to take care of a baby. And so when I came back to work after taking that 2 months off, he kind of made my life a little difficult, just by comments and things that he would make about that situation.
Okay.
And I felt like, you know what? I don't need this. I deserve better than this. I did the right thing. I did what was important to me and to my family. And so I quit that job. And I'd always wanted to go back to school or, become a teacher at some point. I always, put it off and put it off. And here I am. I decided to go back to school for 3.5 years to get my teaching degree and a master's degree. And now I've been teaching for going on 12, 13 years, with a little break in between because there was another big change in my life that I can talk about later, but I don't want to compromise all the time right now. So, career changes have happened in my life, but I look back at each one and I see them as stepping stones to making myself better and becoming more of what I wanted and who I wanted in my life.
Right. Yeah, that's an amazing story. There's a lot there.
Yeah, yeah. There's even more, but I'll take a break.
Right. I'm hoping you can get into it even more,
Yeah, I
in a
will.
little bit, but while we're in this little intermission here, um, you mentioned one little detail that stuck out to me in particular, how you were like, "I made my decision and I didn't look back. No regrets."
Hmm.
At what, like, level of strength within yourself and introspection, like, what level do you have to be at to be able to look at change and where you're heading in life without looking back with regrets?
Hmm.
And I guess before you answer that, I'm gonna also throw out, what do you think is really a regret? Like, what does that mean to regret something?
Um, okay, so multi-part question there. So
Yeah, I guess.
no, no, it's a fine. So I mean, regret is when we think about something that we did that we obviously wish we hadn't done, or had made a different choice, or said something differently, acted differently, um, just chose differently about some situation because you realize that, you know, it was probably a mistake or something that, didn't serve you well or didn't serve somebody else well. Not just about ourselves, because it's not about being selfish, it's about other people
Mhm.
too. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think, a lot of people get asked, do you regret certain things in your life? And, some people say, no, I don't regret it because it shaped and molded me into what I am or who I am now, even through the tough times. And I totally buy into that. I totally think that that is valid. I think that there's some people who can't say that because they're going to say, yeah, I wish I hadn't done this. But then you think about, if they hadn't done it, if you hadn't done it, then what could it have been something that changed your life in a different direction, or are you better off where you are now because it happened? And that's a hard
Right.
question to answer. I mean, who knows? for a lot of situations, we don't really know which direction our life will take at every juncture and every moment and every decision that we make. So,
Exactly.
yeah, so I think that that's why a lot of people can say with a lot of conviction, no, I have no regrets, because if they're happy with where they are right now, even though they might have had to stumble along the way or encounter some roadblocks or some setbacks, if they're happy with who they are right now and they feel good about where they are, then, they wouldn't be there if had they, maybe made some changes or different decisions along the way.
Right. I agree 100%.
Yeah.
Because
So,
it's when you look back and you think about all these things that you could have done or you've done, you can't turn back the hands of fate or anything like that.
mm-hmm.
And in my opinion, at least, as long as you're actively trying to better yourself and looking at the past and the things you regret with a lens that's along the lines of, like, I did this thing wrong, but I'm trying to improve now. And in the present, I am better than I was before. As long as you have that mentality, do you really need to regret anything? Because the point of regretting past things that happened is to basically learn your lesson. If you think of the practicality of your memory, like the purpose that it serves in terms of a primitive survivalistic approach, like you're programmed to regret, or at least to remember,
Right.
because you want to fix the present. So do you really need regrets if you're always getting better?
No, and again, I think it's how you frame it, and I think it's kind of what you said. It's a memory. It's more remembrance that will serve you well, as long as you do something with it to better yourself, or even go back and make amends with someone or some situation that you might be feeling that regret. I mean, I know that's the word that we're kind of focused on here, but
Yeah.
it's a very human nature, emotion and feeling. So, I don't think there's anything wrong with using that word, but I think, if you just kind of tweak it a little bit and think more about what you're saying of remembering, where you were, remembering what you did, remembering how you handled a situation that, didn't go so well, or didn't go as the way you wanted it to, or you intended to, or you just basically screwed up or made a big mistake, but if it makes you a better person in the long run, then it's a benefit, because you're learning from it. It's a learning experience to make
Right.
you a better person, and not everybody does that. But it really depends on I think your kind of your how you feel about yourself. I think it kind of is sort of deep rooted in do you feel confident in yourself that who you are can handle facing things like regret, and not carry them with you the rest of your life, and be able to let them go. And
Right.
I am no expert at that. Trust me, I struggle with that all the time, because you think about things that kind of cling on to, or that kind of anchor you down sometimes.
Well, it's
And
almost like, did I really change? Did I really redeem myself?
yeah,
That's more the question.
yeah. And I think you can, but I think letting go of it is a different process. Like, I don't think you can erase it from your memory, but can you let it go enough to where it doesn't hinder your moving forward?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, and things are always going to change. Like, just because things happen in the past doesn't mean that time necessarily stops to let you pick up all the pieces.
Right.
Like, there's going to be great changes that allow you to flex your new personality and grow into the reputation you want to be in, but you're also going to continue to make mistakes, sometimes even worse ones than you made in the past.
Sure.
But just you can't just turn against yourself every time that happens, because frankly it happens sometimes,
Yeah. And I think
even
that,
when it is purely by intention.
sure. And I think as kind of human nature, a lot of us can fall into that trap
Right.
and get stuck there. And I find myself sometimes, doing that, and it takes a lot of strength and energy and focus and you know um, conviction about wanting to change and become better from it, to kind of fight it off, because
Yeah.
it could be a strong pull sometimes. um,
Right.
it's not a cakewalk.
Yeah.
um,
And sometimes it's just up to us to bring about change so we can stop dwelling, stop beating ourselves up. Kind of like the definition of insanity is doing something over and over again. Like if
mhm,
you always condemn yourself for that thing you did 5 years ago, you're just going to be stuck in this feedback loop. What
yeah,
you need is change.
yeah. Ruminating on something is not necessarily a healthy thing. If it's a negative thing, of course.
Right.
But yeah, and just speaking of negativity, and kind of getting stuck there sometimes. It's not unusual. It's very common, and it's part of the human brain. Our human brains do it.
Right.
I took a course over the summer last summer, called Hardwiring Happiness, and it's about how we can change our thinking and change our brains to be happier brains, because we receive like 70,000 thoughts a day, and many of them can be good, but a lot of them are bad. There's a big percentage of them that are bad,
Hmm.
negative thoughts, and those are the ones that our brains get sort of attracted to.
Hmm.
It's like the analogy of, let's say 10 good things happen in your day, whether it's through work or through school or through, whatever situation you're in. 10 good things can happen, or so 10 things can happen. Nine of them are good and one is bad. And at the end of the day, at nighttime, when you lay down, what's the thing you're going to think about? You're going to think about the negative thing, the bad thing that happened, and forget about all those other things that you should be grateful for.
Why do you think that is?
That's just the way our minds are wired. It's just a very powerful, um, um, I don't know. I don't remember if it's the frontal cortex, the cerebral cortex, or whatever. But this the way the brain is wired. Um, as humans, it's deep rooted back in the days of survival, like caveman days. Just having to always be prepared for the worst to survive. And
Right.
so that's just kind of um, extended itself through our generations, to where it's part of the way our brains are wired. And so you have to work really hard, to change that neuroplasticity, to focus on the good and let the bad things kind of slide on by and not get fixated on them. And I'm not good at that. I work, I'm still working on it. It's a work in progress. It's something
Yeah.
that, you never really, become an expert at. Um, but
Seems like
some,
you're on your way.
I'm trying.
In some ways, I could see that being a good thing, though. Take like a random example that I just thought of let's say you're a clarinet player in a band, or not band, but you're just a clarinet player and you have a recital with your private lessons teacher, and you completely flop the recital. People came to watch you, but you just screwed it up.
Hmm.
And you can't really sleep for the next few nights because it was just so embarrassing and humiliating. Like you prepared for this recital and it just failed miserably. But
Hmm.
it's this negativity um that's interesting because it leads you to a crossroads. Basically, do I do something drastic like quit clarinet or have a bad attitude that keeps me in a bad place but at least lets me cope with this? Or do I accept what happened and treat it as a driving force to do better?
Hmm.
So, like, because I had this negative experience, I can make a change in my life, and that would be I can practice more, I can be more attentive when I practice, I have a stronger conviction of why I care. And then eventually, when you have another recital, you just absolutely knock it out of the park.
Hmm. Yep.
Sure, you'll have that recital to always haunt you, but at the end of the day, it's what got you here. And that's
Right.
why you can't regret, back to what we were saying earlier.
Yep. I mean, the ideal situation is what you said in the latter was to use it as a catalyst for becoming better. To put the effort in, to train, to practice, and all that to go and kind of, you know, outdo yourself from before, like replace that, that negative experience with a very positive experience. And it's not, it's some people I think find that easier to do than others. I think it's just the resiliency factor of and I'm sure a lot of it is rooted in, maybe some genetics and maybe and your upbringing, obviously, and the kind of environment that you're raised in, and how you're supported, or kind of the role models that you have throughout your life that demonstrate those kind of resiliency characteristics that not everybody has. And so how you respond to something like that, I think is going to be dictated by a lot of those factors of what made you who you are at that time.
Right.
It's very complicated,
Yeah.
but it's fascinating.
Yeah. So I guess how can we, when there's negative change though, how can we accept it and not fear it?
Well, yeah, it's again, I think everybody's different, but I think, again, just kind of speaking personally for myself, when negative change happens, when something happens that you know um, don't agree with, or something that kind of catches you off guard, or that happens in your life that um, can really drag you down. I think, and I'll just speak again. I'm just speaking personally. Like, a little over a year ago, I had a major situation in my life that caused me to kind of come to sort of a crossroads, and and kind of to choose. I had to choose: do I just kind of commiserate in this? Do I just kind of like wallow in it, or do I do something to make myself better and choose a different pathway? And I I chose the stronger pathway to change make myself better by being more attentive, being more intentional about my day to day life, um,
Mhm.
taking care of myself, healthy wise. I lost a bunch of weight. I started exercising, eating better, sleeping better. Amidst the thing that was happening that was a negative force in my life, it was still there, but I had to choose to try and kind of get out of that storm, and make myself stronger and better so that I could eventually, hopefully, put it behind me, or at least kind of serve, just live with knowing it's there, but not let it take over, and
Yeah.
control me. So I went through some massive changes. Like, some people don't even recognize me anymore, because of the changes that I've made. And
Huh.
my relationship with my wife got better than ever. My relationship with my kids is much stronger than it ever was. Um, and so there's been a lot of positivity that's come from a negative situation. Uh,
Right.
and
But I
that was
have
just
to ask,
yeah.
sorry to cut you off, but I'm just trying to understand this from like a rooted cause and everything. What made you, what truly made you make that decision? Like, what was the final thing that got you on your feet to make this change?
I think it was probably multifaceted. I mean, obviously, I had to recognize that where I wasn't in an ideal place, um, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, and all that stuff. And so I
Yeah.
had to recognize that. So, owning that and embracing that was kind of the first step, and saying, okay, well, I need to work on these things, and
Okay.
it's not going to happen overnight. But do I want a better relationship with my wife? Do I want a better relationship with my kids? Do I want to have a better outlook on, my life day to day? Do I want my career to be fulfilling? Do I want to feel good about myself? Do I, I had to embrace sort of that negative force, and
Mm-hmm.
and accept the fact that, either I continue being like that, or I move away from it. And I had to make some choices, um, to move away from it, because I knew that I had to fix some things, and I knew that I had to become better, so that
Yeah.
I wouldn't stay in that place, and my relationships wouldn't stay in that place.
It was like you faced yourself.
It's a lot of introspection. It's a lot of kind of digging deep and doing a lot of thinking, doing a lot of journaling, doing
Huh.
a lot of things to, try to peel back sort of layers and figure out, why did I allow myself to get where I was? Why did I allow, how did that be, you know, how did that happen to me? And knowing that I may not have all the answers, and I may not be able to explain everything or understand it all,
Mm-hmm.
I still knew that I deserved better, and I deserved to give myself better than what I was, and to give my wife and my kids better than I was. And so, without going into a lot of detail about what it was, just
Yep.
knowing that I had to make some changes, because those things were important enough to me to make it happen.
Right. It was like at your lowest point. You s-
It got pretty low at sometimes. Yeah, yeah. So, but I think sometimes, when you get to that point, there's only one way to go, and
right.
that's up. You just have to kind of build, kind of break yourself down, and then rebuild yourself one
You
step at a
just
time, one
remember.
block at a time. It's not going to happen overnight, and it's still happening. It's a work in progress, and that's the way it should be. You should always be working on yourself. You should always be looking to change yourself for the better. You should always be tweaking, fine tuning, whatever.
Yeah. Um.
Do I have setbacks? Of course I do, but they seem to be getting less frequent and a little bit less intense, and I seem to get through them quicker and better each time. So again, it's everybody's on their own timeline. There's no timeline for this. Depending on what the situation is, everybody is on their own timeline, and the I think the big idea is just to not give up. You just got to know that, keep your eye on the prize of what you want in the
Right. It's like at your lowest point, you remember what's important,
end.
and
Yep.
I think you did.
Well, and I tell you, the other thing that sort of the sort of the confluence of all this too was it was right at the beginning of the pandemic. So, that in and of itself was a major change for so many people, right? I mean, our whole world. So,
Mhm.
our worlds were kind of yanked out from underneath us, and all the things that we did day to day to keep us busy, sports, activities, social stuff, whatever, all got kind of taken away. And so, we're all kind of left with this sort of the basics of life, the sort of, things that are right in front of us that we often overlook or just become blurred because we're busy with life. And especially, I'm much older, so I have kids, and I have, kids involved in things. So I'm running them here and there. And, life just kind of takes over as you get
Yeah.
older with all that stuff going on. And you lose sight of the things that are most important in front of you. And for me, I think, this is kind of maybe sounds strange to say, but the pandemic has been a blessing to me. I feel like I'm better off because of it, and I know it's a negative thing in our world, but for me personally, and not to be sound selfish, but it 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 kind of removed a lot of the clutter and a lot of the distraction in life, and made me focus on what was right in front of me and pay
Yeah.
attention and be intentional, and you know you know decluttered my life to where I could see clearly of what I needed to work on.
Yeah, it forced you into a situation where you can you have to confront yourself, and because it cuts out a lot of the extra noise, as you were saying,
Hmm.
it allows you a lot more opportunities to actually put forth the effort.
Yep. So I feel like the pandemic kind of saved me from myself.
Or was it you who saved you from yourself?
Well, the pandemic was the situation, I think, that caused me to refocus, to look inside, to see the things that were right in front of me that I was not paying attention to, and doing my, you know, husbandly, fatherly duty or whatever, and
Mhm.
had kind of lost sight and track of that, and just needed to clean it up.
I agree with that, although I guess kind of devil's advocate here, it's like it was a big driving force that helped you,
Hmm.
but
Yep.
really, wouldn't you have found your way either way? It's
I
hard to say, but
It's hard to
I don't
say.
know.
It's hard to say. It is hard to say. Now, not to say that I wouldn't, but again, the timeline. Who knows if something else would have come along that would have created the perfect storm for me to be able to, see and experience the necessity for the change that I needed to do in my life.
Right. But at the end of the day, the pandemic could have just been a thing and you could have stayed stagnant, but you did put in the effort.
Hmm. Yep.
So I'm just trying to separate what I'm trying to say is I'm trying to separate this thing, this outer thing
It's
that
outside
was
force.
like, yeah, this outside external force from the equation,
Mhm.
because at the end of the day, it was your intrinsic value and everything that got you out.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it does boil down to me
Mhm.
uh, choosing to do things differently, choosing to make changes.
Right.
And, like I said, I'm such a different person from just over a year ago. Such a different person. And, am I perfect? Nope, nobody is. I still have a ways to go. Sure, I do. Um, but I've seen the progress and I've felt the progress, and it feels good. And I don't plan on stopping anytime soon.
Yeah. And that's really what matters, right?
Hmm. Yep. Yep. You can always strive to be better. And that's what I plan to do.
Um yeah, so did you want to continue with your story and everything?
Well, you had asked me about. I made a comment about not looking back with any regrets, and we talked about regret. So that was
Yeah.
whenever I was saying that I chose a very different pathway from my upbringing. To I was a West Virginia Baptist, and I met a Jewish girl who was born in New York. So I don't know how much different you can get from a Virginia Baptist to a New York Jew,
Right.
but we came together, and it took a lot of um, kind of internal searching for both of us to decide whether this would work, because it's very different. And but the bottom line was, sort of at the deep root, was we loved each other. So it's kind of like that sort of cliche, love conquers all.
Yeah.
But we did have to go through a lot of discussion, a lot of learning, a lot of understanding of each other and where we stood on things, and what we were willing and able to compromise on. Um, and so that became a major change for me, because, you know, you know, do I feel like I'm turning my back on my upbringing by, marrying somebody from a totally different religion, very drastically different? Did she have to feel the same way? Um, so we had to have a lot of discussions about how to raise kids and what kind of household we would have and all that. So, there was a lot of compromise and a lot of decision making and things that had to take place in advance. Uh,
Changes.
Changes, yep, a lot of changes that were going to happen in my life because of me choosing that she was the one I wanted to be with, and I was willing to make the change to make it happen.
Yeah.
Um, it was worth it to me, and you know, some people may make that choice, or at the same time that say I did, and then later on realize it was the wrong choice. But I've never ever felt like I made the wrong choice. I've always known that this is the right choice that I made. I've never looked back with any regrets about making those really tough decisions and choices about my life and my how I raise my family and what kind of household we have and all that. Was it very different from my upbringing? Yeah. Did I know how different it was going to be at the very beginning? I could only imagine. I didn't know for sure, but you know what? I looked at it as an opportunity for growth, an opportunity for learning new things, an opportunity for expanding my horizons. And I try to look at every opportunity like that as such. Like moving to DC, that was expanding my horizons. I was going from, a little very homogeneous scenario to a very big melting pot, diversity place, Washington, D.C., that I
Hmm.
knew was going to be a challenge for me to, adjust myself to that. But it was that has been the best move I've made in my life, besides marrying my wife, of course. But just I wouldn't have met her had I not made that move. I opened my mind to the idea of change in myself, to see it as a growth opportunity, to see it as an expanding opportunity, to learn and be uncomfortable even. I learned through being uncomfortable in a situation where I've never been in a huge city like that with all these different cultures and ethnicities, and I had to adapt, and it was invigorating, it was exciting, and it was once I got there, I was there for 7.5 years, and I hated to leave. I love DC. It's a great city. I would go back in a heartbeat. It was just a tough place to raise families because it's very expensive. Plus, my wife's job brought us here 23 years ago. And
Hmm.
Cincinnati's been a great home for us too. We've raised our family here. We love it here. Um, and so, yeah. And then talk about more change. Once we came back to Cincinnati after about, we were here for 12, 13 years, I guess. Obviously, having kids and stuff. Um, my wife gets an opportunity to take us to China for her job for P&G. So I had just started teaching. I was like 7 years into teaching because it was my third career change. And she's like, "Hey, we have an opportunity to go to China." And my first reaction was, "Wait, we just had a baby 2 months ago. There's no way in hell I'm moving to China." We just had a major life change in our 40s, you know, and had a new baby, and she's wanting to go to China. And I'm like, "There's no way in hell I'm going to do that." But I gave it 24 or 48 hours, and I kind of let it sink in a little bit. And I started thinking about, you know what? This is another opportunity for change. This is an opportunity for growth. This is an opportunity for learning something new, for, expanding my horizons, for seeing the world, going and doing something maybe uncomfortable, maybe kind of crazy, but why not? Let's do it. It's an opportunity. So,
Hey, wait, real quick.
yeah,
Do you think you would have reached that same decision if you hadn't had that similar experience moving to DC?
no, nope, because I remembered that. I remembered the benefits in the long run of making that decision to move to DC.
Okay.
So I saw it as a similar experience, but now I'm just even moving further, halfway around
Yeah,
the
it's
world.
kind of like increments, right?
Yep. And I'm going to a culture that I don't understand and I don't know much about, and they speak a different language. And I knew it was going to be challenging, but I was up for the challenge. It took me a little bit, but I finally decided, within a short time, that you know what. And plus, I like this is an opportunity for my wife. This is not about me. This is about her too and her career. So it was not. I wasn't going to be selfish about it. I wanted her to have this opportunity for her career growth and her career
Right.
path. And
So
so,
it was like a selfless act too.
yeah, yeah. So I was willing to make that change and sacrifice my teaching because I had to resign from teaching. It's not like they were going to hold my position for 4 years while I went away. So and again, these things all work in my favor eventually, and I'll tell you why. Because we got to see the world, all of Asia. We traveled all over the place, so that was amazing. I think my kids grew a lot and learned a lot, and became very different people than they would have had they stayed here. Um, just the experiences that we had were incredible. And then coming back, another change that happened was, we moved back into our house here in Montgomery. So we, stayed in our same place. We just rented it out while we were gone. So we moved right back home. And, long story short, I stumbled into a connection here at Sycamore Junior High, who was the principal here was the one who hired me at my first teaching job in 2004.
Mm.
And so I ran into her and she got my foot in the door teaching, doing some sub teaching here. And now I've been here for 5 years since we came back from China. I've basically been in the junior high. And I can't tell you how many years I drove past this school going home from my old job, thinking how nice it would be to be working a mile from my house and at Sycamore Junior High over the school that I was working at, 25 minutes across town. And so
Yeah.
again, things happen. I think things happen for a reason. And so that change wouldn't have happened had all these other changes not been sort of linked together and sort of like a domino.
Yeah. That's so crazy. And you've been there for 5 years now?
Well, we came back in 2015. I started teaching that winter. So that was just substitute teaching the rest of that year. So 2016 was my first full year. So this will be my fifth full year there. Here.
And that's when I was there, right?
Yes, I think you were my first. Might have been my first year or second year teaching. You were an eighth grader in my class.
No, I was a 7th grader.
You were in my seventh grade class instead of eighth grade.
So, in my 7th grade math class, I had a teacher who I'll leave his name out, but
Well, oh, are you the year that I came in sub to take
yes.
his place for
Yes,
the?
you
Okay, all
came
right. So
in the
yes, you were seventh
midpoint.
grade then. Yeah, you were seventh grade then. So isn't that interesting? Like that was only I was there for basically a little over about a half a year, half a school year. And immediately, like, I was drawn to you. I just thought you were a really, cool, fascinating kid, and very quiet, very humble. But I don't know, just and it's so funny that now sort of we're looped back to, reconnecting on your senior year, and just kind of rediscovering each other. It's really very, 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 very cool.
Right.
So,
Yeah, because after that 7th grade year, I got your class again, so I had you for a full year,
okay,
8th grade.
okay, there you go. So I thought they were eighth grade, but I forgot that you were part of that partial year that I was here. And the other thing that I really appreciate is you would reach out to me even through high school occasionally, just shoot me an email, or I would shoot you an email or whatever, just to keep in touch. Hey, you coming to the football game?
Mhm.
Yeah, and just to keep in touch. I thought that was really cool. As a teacher, that's kind of what we thrive on. I think is just those relationships with students that become longer term. And then when we see the kids who are maybe a little bit obviously immature and stuff as a seventh or eighth grader, and then see what they become is just one of the most rewarding feelings as a teacher. I can't tell you.
Right. But you just came back from China when you
Yeah,
came in my class?
yep. I had just gotten back. I wasn't even planning on going back to teaching right away. I was planning on taking a year and just kind of getting ourselves resettled back into life here in America, getting the house set up, getting the kids going with school and activities. But this opportunity came up and I couldn't pass it up because I knew eventually I wanted to be in Sycamore Junior High. And I knew if I didn't take that opportunity that it may not come along again. So I had to kind of suck it up and toss my plan aside and go ahead and jump in when I could.
Right. And it's also weird when you think about it because I remember I don't know if the school's different now, but I took Chinese that year Yeah, 7th grade was the first year that foreign languages were like a required
Yep.
class. So
Yep.
I took Chinese
Took Mandarin.
and that Mandarin Chinese, and that room was like right next to yours.
Yep, it was. And I would probably use my Chinese a little bit. Just coming back from China, I would probably say some things every once in a while in class. And as an 8th grader, I think you had Mandarin with my son Calvin.
Yes.
He had it when he came here in 8th grade.
Yes.
So I think you guys were in the same Mandarin class with Miss Zhang.
I mainly remember him, at least when I came into the high school.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember him being there in 8th grade, but yeah.
Yep. It's crazy.
It's just weird how our paths kind of crossed in that regard.
Yep, crisscross. They crisscross at times, right?
Right.
So so those are a lot of my stories of life-changing situations, and just more than just the general, changes that happen to a lot of people. That those are sort of the specific kind of life-altering situations that I think I've grown and changed, for the better through. Even as tough as it can be sometimes, but I think in the end, it's how you respond to it, not react to it, but how you respond to it.
Yes.
Reactions can, I think, are very different than responses.
They're like irrational. They're just immediate.
Yep. So I try to always respond and not react.
Yeah. Obviously, you're gonna have a reaction, but
yeah, sure. Yeah, you might need to massage it a little bit to kind of convert it into a response.
Right.
So.
Yeah.
So you're asking all the questions of me. Let me ask you. So you're obviously much younger than I am. So how can you describe the changes that you've experienced so far in your life?
Like articulating my experiences with change?
Well, like what are some of the major things in your life that you feel have created or brought about change in you, beyond, some of the general things that are obvious, but like if there's anything specific that you would share of how it's, how you've been shaped and molded so far. Obviously, you're going to continue.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm kind of an anomaly to most of my peers just because I'm extremely introspective and everything. But I've always thought about my life in terms of like a story with all these story beats and events that happen and everything. Because there's not much history there, I'm only 18.
Right.
A lot of my early years, I just kind of throw to the side. It's like, yeah, I was just different. It was before I could really think or had an identity. So when I usually think to the past and about major changes, I usually use like 7th grade as a cutoff, just because that's when I was more of me. Like if we're thinking of this as like a evolution analogy, it's like I was a fish back then, and then at least 7th grade I was like a Neanderthal at that point. Like I had some connection to what I am now, even though I was so different. But at least I was on land by that point.
Yeah.
But now I'm more of a human, I guess. I mean, I can't say I'm all the way there because, I haven't gone through. I'm really just starting compared to other people, but, but I guess one example of probably the biggest change is something that didn't seem like it at first, but it really defined me in a sense. And I believe it was my sophomore year in band. So it was like the summer before sophomore year, 2018, I believe. And this was marching band. So we had band camp, which was like a 9 to 9 camp every single day for 2 weeks. So it was a lot.
Yeah.
And I I was in band. I played the marimba, which is just a big xylophone. But for all my life, I've loved to sing. I'm self-taught. I know how to whistle and everything. Uh, Never had a lesson. Never even told anybody because I was embarrassed, frankly. Um, well, singing's it's like an intimate relationship, or not relationship, like a instrument.
Yeah.
It's a relationship with me and the instrument. Like, it feels like a part of me is out there, while playing an instrument's just like, yeah, it's expression, but it's not like it's from the heart, I guess.
Yeah.
That's just the way I viewed it.
Yeah.
So we have this thing called section day at the end of band camp, where all of the different sections, so like the clarinet section or the saxophone section or the front ensemble, which was what I was in with all the xylophones, we would put on a show. We would design our own show with our own music that we composed, and we just had a talent show basically and got judged by the directors and everything. And I remember I had this idea to do a Michael Jackson themed show because that earlier that year I got into his music. And I just had this idea of singing on a stage, and for some reason I became obsessed with that idea. Like, it was like a dream. I couldn't sleep at night. I don't know why I wanted to do it so much, but it was just super big. But I remember that I would tell everybody throughout those 2 weeks, like, all right, here's the idea. And it was just crazy how we actually started to make advancements. Like, it wasn't just a throwaway idea. It was like, oh, wait, this might actually happen. Everybody's on board. And it was like one of the first times I took charge in terms of like everybody's cooperating with me, but I'm kind of leading this. And at the end, we made it happen. It was exactly how I dreamed of it being like. I got up on that stage. I had my nice little hat. That's my dad's, but I just really like it for some reason because it's classic.
Yeah.
And I was wearing a suit and everything, and my friend Claire Atkinson, who did the Identity episode, and you know her too.
Yep.
She composed a melody or a medley of the songs we were going to do, and I had my friend record it, and we did it. I still have it to this day, this tape, and it's such an odd documentation to have because that moment changed me forever, and I have it on tape.
That's awesome.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
But
so what
ever
was the
since,
so what was the song? You said it was a medley of songs or a combination of things?
yeah, it was just like Billie Jean and Beat It together.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, and when I did it, I don't know, it was so weird. My experience, I would never sing in front of anybody, not even like my closest friends. Yet here I was on a stage with my group singing in front of like what, 90 people?
That's awesome.
I don't know how I did it, and it wasn't
Yeah.
perfect by any means,
Well,
but
yeah.
I remember if you asked me like, what do you recall from the moment of being there? I've obviously, because I'm underage, have never like been drunk before, but just my perception of it was, okay, yeah, that was a hangover if I've ever known one. Like, I remember people whipped out their cell phones because they don't have lighters, but treated it as such.
Right. Right.
And I describe it like a hangover because it was like my memory was in snapshots.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I just remember pictures of the audience because it was just so much emotion all at once.
Right. Right.
And
You're probably in a completely different altered state of mind at the time that you just couldn't really capture it, at the moment.
yeah,
That's crazy. That's so cool. I think
right.
I think you should probably post that on YouTube or something for other people to see.
Yeah, I have unlisted videos of
Oh
that, but I
yeah.
probably could do that. I don't know. Um,
So you dug deep. You dug deep to overcome, an uncomfortable situation or a fear or whatever.
I did, but also it was just the idea of, so many points of my life were just like I wanted to do something or wanted to make something happen, but it was always just a neat idea that
Hmm.
never really happened. But ever since, I feel like since that day, I've become more confident in my abilities to and my convictions to make things happen.
That's awesome.
And yeah, like the next summer, I did it again for
Yeah.
Section Day. We did different songs.
Yeah.
Um, I worked on a short film, like a horror movie short film
Hmm.
with a couple of guys, and it turned out really well. Um, I made a club at my school. Uh, I made this podcast.
Yeah, I mean that's huge. That's a huge undertaking and very, not only just, rewarding for yourself, but so beneficial to, so many other people.
Right, I hope so.
Yeah, no, I think so. I'm super impressed and super fascinated by the whole thing. And for me, like I've told you in kind of our conversations, is like, just sort of the timing was very pertinent for me of our reconnection. And to even feel like as an adult, here I am learning from such a wise young, soul of, just such introspection and such, valued thought that, I was just really not surprised, but just still kind of blown away.
Why is that?
I just, I, I don't know. I just, you just don't expect when you hear from someone at your age, like the way you know, uh, just the way you put the words together in a message and the way you can, articulate yourself and your thoughts and, be so positive and encouraging about it. And, to me, I don't know, I just felt like, wow, this is quite impressive, for, somebody who at your age is able to, formulate all that because it's
I
not very
try.
typical. It's not very typical. Trust me, it's not very typical. So,
Well, I guess another example of that is I try to work on my articulation in my speech a lot, just because I came from a point of being self-conscious about just just how I speak
hmm,
because there's so much on my mind all the time.
yeah.
Like it's so clustered with things that it's so difficult to express exactly what I mean or exactly how I feel. So I'm forced to educate myself or to find a desire to learn so I can actually translate what the heck is going on in there.
That's funny.
So it's
That's
like
awesome.
that's a driving force for that change.
That's awesome.
So I
Yeah.
always appreciate it when people are like dude, you like it's like I have some friends at work that are like, dude, sometimes I just like you're just too smart that it's kind of intimidating. Or not like
But
that I'm smart, but I
no, no,
just
no.
use
Yeah,
words.
no, you're very mature, and you just the way you present yourself and the way you converse and everything. It's just it's like beyond your years for many kids of your age, and I think that's what people are talking about. It's not, and it's not like you shouldn't feel like it's bragging or anything. You just be proud of yourself and.
Yeah, I've got flaws.
Yeah, I mean, we all do. So we all have a lot to bring to the table and contribute as well too.
Right.
Yeah.
There's something to learn about everybody. So
Hmm. Yep. We
that's what
just
I
have
like
to
about this show.
open our hearts and minds.
Right. And I appreciate you coming on here today to open your heart and mind.
Sure. I'm pretty much a wear your heart on your sleeve kind of guy.
Yeah. So yeah, thanks. I guess this is kind of where we're ending off. So
Okay,
thanks for joining me.
sure. I appreciate you having me on. I enjoyed it, and I hope that you and whoever your listeners end up being get something from it.
Yeah, I agree. I guess if you can sum this up quickly, what do you think is the big takeaway of this episode?
I think the big episode or big takeaway for this episode would be don't be afraid of change. Don't be afraid of facing fears or dealing with negativity in life, and think about try to learn about yourself of how you would how you can approach different situations to feel confident to be able to respond and not react, and use use the opportunities to learn and to grow, um, and just don't be afraid of a challenge to create change in your life.
Yeah, that's some good stuff.
Yep.
And with that said, thanks everybody for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.